presidential debate, a growing divide between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. The politics of Planned Parenthood. One candidate's past could affect his future. March for Life, 1 week out. What you need to know. And Mexicans and the Pope will unveil a special gift on EWTN News Nightly for Friday, January 15th, 2016. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Topping the news, the GOP debate. Candidates met in South Carolina last night to duke it out over immigration, ISIL, and Ted Cruz's eligibility to run. In the race for the White House, the bromance is gone between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, the two current Republican frontrunners.
Back in September, my friend Donald said that he had had his lawyers look at this from every which way. There was nothing to this birther issue.
Cruz took Trump to task for questioning why, if he was born in Canada, he's eligible to run for president.
Since September, the Constitution hasn't changed. But the poll numbers have.
Trump doesn't deny it.
Because now he's doing a little bit better. No, I didn't care before.
But in their most pointed exchange, he tried to justify his remarks.
Here's the problem. We're running. He does great. I win. I choose him as my vice presidential candidate, and the Democrats sue because we can't take him along for the ride. I don't like that, okay?
Well, listen, I've spent my entire life defending the Constitution before the U.S. Supreme Court, and I'll tell you, I'm not going to be taking legal advice from Donald Trump.
You don't have to.
The battle moved from Canada to New York, and the charge from Ted Cruz that Donald Trump represents what he calls New York values.
But everyone understands that the values in New York City are socially liberal or pro-abortion or pro-gay marriage, focus around money and the media. Not a lot of conservatives come out of Manhattan. I'm just saying.
Trump responded, uncharacteristically somber, by invoking September 11th.
We rebuilt downtown Manhattan, and everybody in the world watched, and everybody in the world loved New York and loved New Yorkers. And I have to tell you, that was a very insulting statement that Ted made.
Many agreed with Donald Trump. Also on stage, presidential candidate Chris Christie battling with Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Christie claims he never wrote a check to Planned Parenthood, contradicting comments he made in 1994. Christie was quoted as saying, "I support Planned Parenthood privately with my personal contribution, and that should be the goal of any such agency, to find private donations."
Unfortunately, Governor Christie has endorsed many of the ideas that Barack Obama supports, whether it's Common Core or gun control or the appointment of Sonia Sotomayor or the donation he made to Planned Parenthood. Our next president and our Republican nominee cannot be someone who supports those positions.
And in just a moment, we'll talk with the head of the Susan B. Anthony list, who was in South Carolina for the debate. Looking at other stories, today's world. After a worldwide sell-off of overnight stocks triggered by another slide in oil prices, the Dow dropped a whopping 390 points, making this the worst two-week open for a year ever. 12 Marines are missing after two helicopters collided. Rescue crews are searching for survivors. The Marines were on a training mission near Oahu. Searchers have discovered a debris field in the water. We're getting our first look at video of a Monday airstrike on ISIS cash depot in Mosul, Iraq. Money flew into the sky after two bombs hit the building. The U.S. military says it will continue to target the enemy's finances. And the White House says it's too soon to tell if they will lift economic sanctions against Iran. The U.S. and international community are awaiting word tonight about whether it is in compliance with a nuclear deal. Wyatt Goolsbee reports from the White House.
Lauren, the White House is waiting to hear from the International Atomic Energy Agency, which could issue a report on Iran as early as tonight. If Iran is found to be in compliance with its nuclear agreement, it could receive billions of dollars in sanction relief. Press Secretary Josh Earnest says Iran is taking important steps towards curbing its nuclear program, but he says the U.S. wants to make sure Iran doesn't cut any corners. During the White House briefing, Earnest was also pressed about the Navy sailors who were captured by Iran after straying into Iranian territory Tuesday. They released video of the sailors on TV and aired a video apology from one of the sailors. Arizona Senator John McCain is critical of the administration for not denouncing Iran's actions.
They've been responsible for acts of terror all over the world, and this delusion that somehow they're not going to be that way has obviously been refuted by their missile tests, by the firing the missile next to our aircraft carrier, and now this.
The president didn't start a war over this. The president pursued diplomatic engagement through his Secretary of State, who had an open diplomatic channel of communication with his Iranian counterpart. And because of that important diplomatic work, our sailors were released unharmed 14 hours after being taken into custody in their own boats.
Earnest says he doesn't want to minimize the gravity of the situation, but he says in this particular case, diplomacy led to the best possible outcome. However, critics of the White House say that the U.S. was humiliated by Iran and that they shouldn't be trusted to comply with the nuclear agreement.
Thank you, Wyatt. The Anglican Church creates a task force to rebuild relations after suspending the U.S. Episcopal Church for supporting the redefinition of marriage. Ed Pettin is the Rome correspondent for the National Catholic Register. He's also an Anglican convert. Ed, what does it mean for the Anglican Communion to suspend the Episcopal Church?
Right, well, this is unusual, Lauren. I mean, it was unexpected, but it means that the Episcopal Church, which is the American branch of Anglicanism, is being suspended for 3 years. And that's because they authorized same-sex marriages in the Episcopal Church last year unilaterally, and so that upset other provinces within the Anglican Communion.
Does this affect Catholics in any way?
Well, it does in the sense that, in a good point, really, first of all, is that it keeps the Anglican Communion together, which is good for the Vatican because it means they can dialogue better with the Anglican Communion if it's one body, rather than going off into a schism, which is what was feared. But also that it shows that there is a global south, if you like, which is very much holding up tradition and scripture and doctrine and traditional doctrine. And that's a good sign for the Catholic Church because that has been a source of tension that we've known over the past few years, especially at the last synods on the family.
It seems to me that the African bishops have been the most vocal on marriage as a union of a man and a woman. And you're saying, it seems to me, that it doesn't seem like this could lead to a split in that community.
Well, not yet, but you never know, of course, and it's amazing actually how the Anglican Communion sort of muddles along, but it could easily result in a schism some way down the line, but it's anyone's guess, really, if that's going to really happen.
Well, it seems like other news out of Rome. Pope Francis, we know he's a big leader in social media, 8 million Twitter followers, but he doesn't own a computer, and he met with Google's CEO Eric Schmidt, and he also went to a nursing home today. Why did he do that?
Yes, this is something he's doing, Lauren, every month as part of the Year of Mercy, which is to go on a sort of surprise visits to different places near Rome or in Rome to really extend the hand of mercy. And he's gone to an old people's home tonight and also to another place where there are 6 people in a vegetative state. It's one of these, it's a rare place where it's just 4 people in that state. So that's what he did this afternoon and this evening. And then we can expect more of these every month for the next few months during the year.
Ed Pettin, National Catholic Register. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren.
Back here in the U.S., could there be a reshaping of the political debate in America moving forward? Joining us now is Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony List, a group that seeks to elect pro-life politicians. She was in South Carolina for last night's debate. Quite a rowdy debate.
Wow, it sure was.
What did you think?
Well, I thought it was the best debate ever. I think if it ended a half an hour earlier, everyone would have gone away thinking this is absolutely the best. It got really under the skin of everyone, which is usually pretty good. I think some real principles and core values came out in that debate.
Including Planned Parenthood, right?
Yes.
You saw the attack earlier that we played against Chris Christie.
Yes.
How did that play in the room, and how important is that to his future career?
Well, in the room, you know, when a good point is made, everybody goes completely silent, and that is what happened in that moment. And most people kind of don't know know the background on that story. And it really is about 20 years ago that the purported check was written from Chris Christie. He says that it actually never happened. Rubio says it did happen. One thing I do know, though, however, is that Rubio has defunded Planned Parenthood 3 times in his own state, and he has consistently decried all of the activities that have gone at Planned Parenthood. So, even though I think it's a fair thing to bring up and it should be brought up, I think probably Christie laid it to rest, and I'm glad that he did.
Well, it's interesting because that debate is not something that you see on the stage these days. Social issues are not front and center. Abortion is not front and center. And so do you think that by at least having this question raised that we're going to see a change in the debates going forward?
Oh yes, the reshaping has already occurred. I mean, and I think it will be filled out more and more as we go into the general election. But since 2012 until now, pro-life candidates have gone from defense to offense. Pro-life candidates are talking about late-term abortion. They're talking about defunding Planned Parenthood. Never a word whispered about that idea in about 40 years, and now it is coming out on the national stage. It is a great moment, and it's a flourishing moment for the pro-life movement, and yes, it will be more and more visible, and that means that they're emboldened, and there is a mandate when we have a pro-life president.
One thing I wanted to show you, President Obama was recently on YouTube, and let's show a clip of what he did.
This is rosary beads that Pope Francis gave me.
Wow.
That obviously means a lot to me because I so admire him, and it makes me think about peace and promoting understanding and ethical behavior.
What do you make of those remarks, considering President Obama is not in favor of defunding Planned Parenthood?
Well, my thought is first that isn't it wonderful that he owns a rosary, that the Pope saw fit to give him one, and that's probably how we should all react. However, I think we should all really look carefully when our faith is used as a political tool. And I'm not saying I know the motivations of his heart, but I do know that he absolutely rejects the fundamental positions of the Catholic Church almost down the line. And so it does make me a little bit suspicious that that this beautiful gift might be used as a political tool, and that's just wrong. We don't want that.
All right, Marjorie Dannenfelser, thank you so much from the Susan B. Anthony list.
Coming up, presidential politics, how last night's debate could shape the race to the White House. And improving relations, a key rabbi in Rome talks about his upcoming visit with the Pope.
Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Lauren Ashburn. GOP lawmakers are trying to set aside the rhetoric from presidential debates as they huddle for the last day of their annual retreat. Members of the House and Senate have been discussing some of the biggest issues facing the party and the country in the year ahead. House Speaker Paul Ryan and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell are promoting what they call big, bold, conservative agenda in 2016.
We're certainly committed to trying to pass a budget this year, no question about it. I don't have to remind you, for the last 5 years under the Democratic majority, they didn't do that.
And we also spoke with Congressman Jeff Fortenberry of Nebraska, who tells us Republicans are working for a replacement for Obamacare.
Some people have been helped by the new health care law, but the vast majority of people have been seriously harmed.
While many Republicans have been hesitant to weigh in on the GOP primary, most lawmakers say they will back whoever gets the party's nomination, even if that is Donald Trump. Joining me now is John Christopher Bua, a White House correspondent and adjunct professor at Georgetown University, and Jared Rizzi, the White House correspondent for SiriusXM Satellite Radio. And we often sit in the briefing room asking the tough questions to Press Secretary Josh Earnest. Do you think, Jared, that the tough questions were asked last night?
I do think there were tough questions last night, Lauren, mostly because this is a Republican field that has been at odds with each other, and we finally saw the last conflict that we've been avoiding, which was Donald Trump actually getting some attack on him. Anything that brings us to that point, I think, brings the hard question. So as long as that box got checked.
How about you, JC? Is it important that Trump is bullied?
The bully? How is that? I think the American people are asking the tough questions. And I think that the president has to wear 5 hats, and the candidate has to wear 5 hats. Domestic policy stuff, diplomat in chief, the commander-in-chief. A new one that I thought of earlier today, consoler-in-chief. Basically, America's pastor. It started with Lincoln. It went to FDR during World War II. Bill Clinton, I Feel Your Pain, Oklahoma City. Obama with Sandy Hook. And the last is the president must be there supporting his candidates or he won't get his legislative agenda through. 2010, Obama lost the House, and in 2012, he lost the
Do you think that happened last night?
Senate.
I mean, I think your point is that you have to see all of those qualities on stage at a GOP
That's
debate
right.
like that. And did you?
It kind of was a mixed bag. As far as the tough guy image, that certainly Trump had that. There were others who kind of had the domestic. Kasich was there for the domestic policy stuff. Being a governor, he's in charge of his own state. There was a mixed bag of that.
Let's get back to, Jared, the loggerheads that we saw with Trump versus Ted Cruz. You know, you used to think these guys are buddies, and gloves were off last night.
Well, and finally, because we've all been waiting for this moment. I mean, it was just for those of us who enjoy the conflict in politics, not one side or the other, but just to see something happen. Nobody's been able to really land a punch on Trump in a way that was significant. I think we saw him get a little bit rattled last night. I do think that he came out over Cruz when it comes to this birther issue, because it's still something that we're talking about. Right. So Cruz doesn't get to sweep that under the carpet just yet.
No, that's very true. And the other thing that happened, I think, was that he sort of had to double back and say to Cruz, well, if we were running mates and if he was my vice president, you know, that would be a problem. So, you know, the other person we're not talking about here is Jeb Bush. Ooh. And earlier you said who?
Jeb.
Yeah, right, Jeb
It was
Bush.
great hope for Jeb and great hope for the real conservative, but the progressive conservative party of the Republicans. And Jeb is sort of a no-show. I mean, the only one who was more of a no-show was Ben Carson, who was kind of hard to follow.
Well, you know, Jeb got the endorsement today of Lindsey Graham, and does that mean anything? He's a former candidate. Does it mean anything that he got that endorsement?
Well, Lindsey Graham was a formidable candidate. I don't know if that means anything. We'll have to see.
Jared?
I don't think so. Well, it does in South Carolina, maybe, where Graham has kind of this rump of support. But I think outside of that, in the national conversation, this was a person who, and maybe I'm channeling Trump here, but this was a person who was polling it at close to or 0%.
If you're channeling Trump, I'm sorry
well,
for you.
yeah, please forgive me for
I feel him. Wait a second. You know, we're both from Queens, New York, and he's a tough guy. And when he made that comment about the smell of death and the Twin Towers going down, that really stopped Cruz cold.
Sure. No, I completely agree with you. And I think it is the first time that we have seen in the debates him take a little knock. Now, whether or not that means anything for Iowa, which is just in a few days, in 2 weeks, we'll have to see.
Well, and that's the thing, is that Trump gets to talk about New York values because he knows that in Iowa and South Carolina, those are the things that people don't want to hear championed, and that's what the punch he gets to throw.
All right,
Big
Jared,
state,
thank
lots
you
of
so
liberals.
much.
We'll see.
Yes, we will. Thank you so much. Jared Rizzi hosts his show on Sirius XM, and John Christopher Bua, who is a White House correspondent. And we are moving on. Let's see here what we're going to. We are going to Rome now, and we're going to be talking about Pope Francis, who is visiting Rome's Great Synagogue on Sunday. The visit comes after a series of papal actions that have upset the Jewish community, including recognizing the state of Palestine and praying at the wall surrounding the Palestinian city of Bethlehem. The chief rabbi of Rome says Catholics and Jews need to work together.
The aim of this visit should be to demonstrate that different religions that must be different can live together in good harmony and to work together for the good of the society.
Rabbi Desenyi says the visit is a sign of continuity, and it will be the third visit any pope has taken to the Great Synagogue of Rome. Prisoners in northern Mexico are preparing a special gift for the Holy Father. They are carving a crossier, or a staff, to give him when he visits the country next month. The 7-member team says they are very proud of creating it for His Holiness. Another group of prisoners is rehearsing songs they hope to play for Pope Francis. The Pope begins his visit February 12th in Mexico City. He's expected to draw a crowd of 2.3 million at his main mass. He'll head to Chiapas, one of Mexico's poorest areas, and then to the city of Moriela, hotspot in Mexico's drug conflict. Ciudad Juarez, across from El Paso, Texas, will be the Holy Father's last stop.
Up next, March for Life, what's on tap for next Friday's protest, and perpetual adoration, a lasting impact one couple has had on their parish.
A quote from our foundress, Mother Angelica. Holiness of life is not the privilege of a chosen few. It is the obligation, call, and will of God for every Christian. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Lauren Ashburn. 1 week from today, thousands of pro-lifers will gather on Capitol Hill to March for Life. Catherine Zeltner is here with a look ahead at this year's theme. Catherine.
Lauren, the theme this year is about empowering women. As you know, March for Life is the biggest pro-life peaceful demonstration in the U.S. This year's theme is pro-life and pro-woman go hand in hand. It counters the message that in order to be pro-woman, you have to be pro-choice. Speakers this year include Iowa Senator Joni Ernst and Republican presidential candidate Carly Fiorina. The crowd will meet on the National Mall for a rally and make its way through D.C. to the Supreme Court. EWTN will have wall-to-wall coverage of the March for Life, beginning Thursday evening with the National Prayer Vigil from the Basilica of the National Shrine. Before the march begins, thousands of teens and young adults will meet early Friday morning for the annual youth rally in Mass for Life. Lauren.
You've been to both of these events. Describe them to me.
It's incredible. The Verizon Center Sports Arena is transformed into a prayer space. There's praise and worship, opportunity for confession, and then the teens will pray the rosary before going to Mass. You can really see the young face of the pro-life movement.
Catherine Zeltner, thank you very much. Well, the church in California celebrates 20 years of its Perpetual Adoration Chapel. Brian Patrick spoke with the organizers.
It's good to have Deacon Dominic Peloso and his wife Mary Ellen, organizers behind the 20 years of Perpetual Adoration at the Church of the Nativity in Menlo Park. You have stayed the course for 20 years. How has that benefited your parish?
You know, when you have a parish that prays, and that's the focus of the parish, wonderful things happen. We've had miracles. It brings people back to church, brings them back to confession. You know, we've had healings in the parish. So, you know, prayer can do nothing but good.
I'm sure it's not without challenges, though, right?
Oh yes, there's always challenges, and you know, it's sometimes it's like a personnel management kind of thing that really happens. And Mary Ellen is really the one that does most of the work, and she's probably put in 1 or 2 phone calls a day to either people who want to join, people who need to leave, substitutes that are needed. And when you add it up over 20 years, that's a lot of phone calls and a lot of work. But we've always had the attitude of we're not working for ourselves or our egos or anything like that, but we're really working for Jesus. And he very dramatically showed us that he's in charge of this program, not us.
Those middle-of-the-hour nights are the toughest to fill, but aren't they the most wonderful, that intimacy with Jesus?
They are. They're hard to fill, but the people that take those hours are actually the most faithful people. They don't easily not come. You know, there has to be a really good excuse for them to not show up. Yes, they really are.
Our parish just built a beautiful freestanding chapel in the woods for adoration. If a parish is considering this, any advice for them?
Well, you know, just to have a committee that's, you know, willing to, you know, put in some time. And, you know, the first couple years are the hardest, you know, and then once you have a base of adorers, it's much easier. Dominic and I run the program alone now. When we first started, we had a committee, and we needed a committee at that point. But now it runs very smoothly.
Well, thanks for your perseverance. What inspired this in you guys to do?
Well, it actually was started with Mary Ellen going to a Marian conference, and during the break they had a presentation on adoration, and I think the first time around she was too hungry to go and skipped it. The next day they did it again, and she went and got on fire and came back and talked to me about it. We talked to our pastor, Father Davenport, at the time, and we're off and running. I think, you know, in answer to that question you had about what should parishes do, is just do it. It's not your program, it's Jesus's program. And can you imagine what this world would be like if every Catholic parish throughout the world had perpetual adoration?
Imagine. Deacon Dominic, Mary Ellen, we appreciate both of you being with us. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for having us.
And thank you to Chief Photographer Paul Fifield for tipping us off to that story. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and watch again on EWTN's YouTube page. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Lauren Ashburn. Good night, and God bless.